Progressives at Xavier University, and I'm currently studying with Professor Joan Schwartz, and I'm working on maritime disaster photography with special emphasis on the Halifax explosion and the sinking of the SS Atlantic. And as you can tell, I'm going to be talking to you today on modernism through the photographer's lens, the architectural photography of Julius Shulman. And it really takes off well where Professor Roma has left us. Walter Gropius once asked, does the photographer or the architect anticipate what is being resolved during an exposure? There is no one answer. The photograph is a representation of an image of the building, a duplication of sorts. The buildings that we have seen thus far in 292 have been portrayed through a certain lens, a photographer's lens. Just like any other medium, photography is an art form to be studied and appreciated. The photographer makes artistic choices with regards to the subject in order to produce the most appealing image. This benefits the architect in turn, since photography helps promote and brand their work, since architects ultimately desire that the photos that they are taken are published in popular design magazines. This way, their buildings can enter the architectural discourse. And you can see what photo I've chosen to open up with this. You'll notice in my slide, so this is Ken Hendrick's photo of Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water. So just keep that in mind that when you're looking at something, know that there was a photographer behind it, although his name is not normally attached to it. Normally, so far we've seen, Frank Lloyd Wright, that's immediately who you know. For the remainder of the presentation, all of the photos that you will be seeing are actually by Julius Shulman, but I've included the architect's name so that you guys can reference them and add them to your own kind of internal image database that you've been growing so far. Julius Shulman began his life on a farm in Connecticut. At a young age, his family moved to Southern California. Here, he continued his interest in the great outdoors, even becoming a good old Boy Scout. When he became of age, he, instead of working in the family business, Shulman went to college at UCLA. He first entered into the engineering program, but he actually only lasted 2 weeks. After that, he pursued his own interests, kind of floundering for a number of years, hopping from major to major. Early on in his career, it was evident that he had great vision and the ability to capture engaging photographs. This right here, of Boulder Dam, was taken with a best pocket camera, a very basic camera for the time, something transportable, very maneuverable. It demonstrates his innate sense of composition that he had early on in his career with very little training. In the spring of 1934, after a number of years of floundering, he transferred to Berkeley. It actually proved to be a very wise career choice, as it led to a chance meeting with Richard Neutra, an American architect. From 1936 to 1968, Shulman would document over 90% of the buildings by Neutra. He successfully captured his ideology and highlighted his chosen materials. Usually, Neutra used steel, glass, and wood. His photographs helped what we're looking at here, the Kaufman House, become an icon of post-war life in California. His photographs of Neutra's building were perspectival in composition, and many of the photographs were taken looking out from the house as opposed to at them, showing off the area around the home. Inspired by California's expansive terrain full of mountains, valleys, and coastlines, Shulman often framed the building within the landscape. Neutra appreciated Shulman's work, although they did not always see eye to eye. He said of Shulman, this is Neutra speaking of Shulman, so the architect on the photographer, his work will survive me. Film is stronger, and good Gothic prints are easier to ship than concrete, stainless steel, or even ideas. Like many West Coast photographers of the 1930s, Shulman adopted straight, finely focused photography. He is comparable to here we have the American photographer Ansel Adams. And when we look at some of the landscapes, I want you to keep this image in mind. Notice the edges, notice how it kind of blurs towards the edges, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Yes, this is a very famous photograph, extremely successful composition in the way it takes your eye from the foreground all the way back to the mountains using the river. And actually here we have, not very rare, but kind of nice to see. This is Shulman at work. This is him with a 35mm camera. He's working on the case study house number 22, the Stall House, in 1960. And we're going to talk more about the case study houses. We might even get into them on Thursday, I'm not quite sure. They're a very famous project, and we're going to be discussing those a bit. So as you can see, kind of a rare moment of the photographer being photographed in Inception. So here we have Neutra's Massillon residence in Cathedral City, California in 1962. Corporate America readily accepted modern architecture, but the public was slower to. Shulman believed that architectural photography's purpose was to sell architecture to the public. And the way that he achieved this was by doing assignments for magazines and also building up architects' portfolios. He became popular with magazine editors for a few reasons. Number one, the quality of his work. Number two, the timely manner in which he completed it. 3, the narrative that he provided. And 4, the uniqueness of each shot. One of the most effective ways that he portrayed modern architecture was by creating a mood, by dressing the scene. Just as you would dress a movie set or even dress yourself today, the interior and exterior, which is kind of interesting, and I'll talk about why, required extra details and a lot of panache. He would set the table in a home or scatter toys to make the space appear lived in. So even if there were no people, there was an implied presence of people in the homeowners. Redecorating the interior was very popular with architects like Neutra. However, in reference to Neutra, Shulman recalls a very particular kind of story about this space. So compare them just in your mind right now. How are they different? How are they similar? And I'll explain to you why they are very different, although it is the exact same residence. So this is me speaking in Shulman's voice. No, I will not put on an accent, but this is happening. Photographing architect Richard Neutra's Massillon residence was a unique experience in my life, and an experience which compounded itself in a most rewarding sequence. As was practiced, with 2 associates, he removed most of what he considered undesirable furniture. Neutra was concerned with the design statements of his architectural elements. He preferred to have the photographs published in European books, which favored the stark drama of his work. However, the furnishings of the Massillons were attractive and of considerable comfort. I was disturbed by Neutra's blatant disregard for the personal aspects of the interiors and arranged with Mrs. Mason later to return at a favorable hour to take new photographs illustrating her lifestyle. This was achieved. The resultant scenes, coupled with the renowned Massillon collection of contemporary art masterpieces, paintings, and sculptures, illustrated how the Massillon lifestyle was further enhanced by the park-like environment of the richly landscaped golf course viewed through the glass walls. The fact that one is black and white and one is color is significant, and I'll talk a little bit about the difference between black and white versus color photography in this day. So you can obviously see which one is the original and which one is the one taken at the later. The one with more furnishings is how Shulman wanted these scenes to be portrayed. Shulman also incorporated people, mainly the homeowners themselves. This demonstrated how the space could be used and lived in. A good example is this, the Greenfield house in 1950. It demonstrates a husband and wife doing crafts. He's throwing a pot, so you have your own little pottery den. His reasoning was that some buildings that he photographed appeared cold and literally lifeless and needed people in them to come alive. Perspective played an important role in enlivening the scene. To bring the viewer into the scene, he would take the shot sometimes from behind a couch to help us enter the space. Conversely, when he took the photograph from outside looking in, like the stall house, we are not an active participant, but instead we're a spectator. Here is the Richard Spencer house, designed by the architect for himself. He had an interest in designing his homes on slopes. This one is actually on a 40-degree slope. It's looking out onto the Pacific Ocean from Malibu. I think that it demonstrates the California lifestyle in which the architect wanted for himself. We get a glimpse into his family life with this cute little dog in the foreground being held by the woman. We also have a little bit of revisiting the act of looking. We're looking at them, they're looking out at the view with those set of binoculars, and I have to just say the little dog is looking at us quite confused. So I said before dressing the scene. This is the Lowey house in 1947. Shulman helped the home fit the modern ideal by using simulated greenery. So the area immediately surrounding these homes were not always camera ready for a number of reasons. For one, these were new homes and there hadn't been sufficient time to grow a lush garden. Sometimes the owners didn't have enough of a budget remaining to actually include shrubbery after building their dream home. So how do you fake greenery? Well, Shulman actually courted around a portable garden, and he would also, at sometimes, you can't see it here, he would take branches and you would put them in front of the field, just the field of vision. He would kind of have little bits of branches that would go in and you could see them like that. So he kind of blurred the distinction between the implied and the actual landscape. Here we have, as I was talking about before, one of the case study houses on the far left and the Choi house on the right. And this is where I'm going to talk a little bit about the comparison between color and black and white photography. So Shulman himself actually opted to use black and white over color in his photographs. This reason is because black and white really successfully portrays contrast and depth while simultaneously emphasizing the forms. This is his belief. When doing these black and white shots, he effectively dramatized the scene using light and shadow, so made a much more dramatic, much more moody, much more aura of a scene. However, in the 1940s, a lot of editors asked for color in their layouts, so in these magazine editorials. Shulman would do these assignments, but he would create his own conditions of light and shadow when doing them. And he really thought that the strong contrast that would have been achieved with the black and white was actually lost by doing these color assignments. And these are just, I'm not going to give you my personal opinion because we are academics here, are we not? But you can definitely see that there is benefits to using black and white. There's benefits to using color. This is obviously that glamour shot, the wife in the home, the husband. It's really stunning. But then you have this, and this really does, use that light and shadow and create kind of a dramatic scene. And we're going to talk about this kind of use of reflections in art as well. So to help inspire a mood, Shulman used available light sources from the particular building to help produce lighting effects. And Professor Roma was talking a lot about lighting today, and that became extremely important in He said, when I take a photograph, I do it right the first time. So growing up in California, and sorry about this GIF if it's giving me seizures, but I just really wanted to emphasize the fact that the sun is changing constantly, and this really was important for him. When you talked about it, he would say, this is just Shulman on the light. When the front of a building is facing west, and it's about 11:45 at noon, the sun will start to appear at the southwest corner of the building. I start to prepare my photograph, camera position, and ready for 12. The sun starts to appear at the south edge of the frame, bringing every detail of the west side to life, light and shadow. He was very specific about the times of day. Which brings us to the Kaufman house. So Shulman's night shots, so you would think you would look at this, you'd say, oh yeah, of course, it's a night shot. That's occurring at nighttime. Were actually done at twilight, around 7 or 8 p.m., when he thought that the sky had a glowing, revealing quality. Skies played a large role in the composition of his architectural photographs. Some of his most memorable shots were actually taken when the weather was rather poor. He would review the building and kind of walk around it and decide whether or not he was going to do it at that time. When he did do this walk around, he was looking for two things in his photograph, and when he was taking the photograph. He was looking for emphasis on shade and emphasis on shadow. So shade is what happens on a hot summer day. You look for shade. Shade is these are the dark areas here. Shadow is much lighter. Shadow is just, you have a shadow behind you. So shade is a darker area. And those are kind of the things that he was looking for when he did these black and white outdoor shots. So going back to the Kaufman house, we have an example of his darkroom techniques that he would use. So the skies around in the back, you would think that they're actually slowly, going back in color gradation just naturally. But actually, those are effects that he would do afterwards in the darkroom. It's a process called being burned in. This is the Lowy house. Shulman was a master of composition, and I think this photograph really emphasizes that. He would use tricks of the eye to entice the viewer. He would do things like manipulation, mirror shots, and duplication to keep us interested, keep it a very visually interesting photograph. Clark and Frey's Lowy house in Palm Springs demonstrates something called horizontal duplication with reflection. So you're seeing the horizontal line. This is actually just a pool in the home, and then you're seeing it horizontally duplicated going down. You would also do this vertically. And this is Neutra and Alexander's Miramar Naval Station Chapel, which demonstrates vertical duplication. So side to side, you could do that with a landscape, you could do that with a building, you could do that with tall trees, and it creates it vertically. This building in particular makes me think of the question that I opened this with. So Walter Gropius asking, does the photographer or does the architect anticipate what is being resolved during an exposure? Just let that sit in. So I'm going to just scoot along here. I really wanted to talk about the case study house. So this was commissioned by the Arts and Architectures magazine. It's number 22 because there were a number of them done between the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Goldberger, when he looked at the iconic photograph, this one here, he said, "For me, this will always be one of the singular images that sum up the city at a moment in time. The house is sleek and white, and its glass walls are cantilevered out over the hills. Two elegantly dressed women lounge inside as the lights of the vast sprawl of Los Angeles basin twinkle below. Here was the modern world, fresher and newer than the East. It possessed a visual drama that the cities of the East Coast could only dream of, and yet with all of its luxury and style." This photograph, and we're going to pretty much end here. When he was taking the photograph, remember when he was sitting outside at the beginning, he was that was him during the day planning out this nighttime shot. And when he did take it, he had all of the lights inside turned off, and he had all sorts of floodlights outside. And he got these two women, he said, just kind of sit there, talk, be conversational. And then all of a sudden he said, okay, lights on. He's sitting from outside. This is very much an outsider looking in photograph, so we are the spectators. And then he took one photograph, the flash bulbs went off, it illuminated. We can see the effects taken upon the roof of the home, but it's just also complementing. This would have been extremely difficult with the technology of the 1960s to take. So he really was awesome for his time, for lack of a better word. And I'm going to leave you with this image, which is my favorite, and these closing words. I'd like you to leave up to your own interpretation of these images, knowing how much went into altering the landscape and altering the furniture. Are Shulman's photographs genuinely anthropological? Or are they just his own vision, which I think you can pretty much answer for yourself. And yes, I like this because of the dog, who was just laughing. I think it's the truest form of enjoying a home. Cheers.
Oh no!
I missed your very opening.
That's
words.
okay.
I think halfway through, like, I'm a master's student. That was amazing.
Oh, thanks, bud.
I really enjoyed it. You should do that as a paper, I think, like for a conference. Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Yay! Excuse me while I go die.
You know what's so weird? Okay, so I had this, I have so much work to do, but I freaked out this morning and didn't want to do it, so I went shopping. And I was texting you, being like, dude, class started at 11:30, I have no idea what time class starts today. So, I wish I had, ended up sending that.